Have you ever looked around your room at 3 in the morning and felt like you were standing in a completely different place than the one you were in just a few hours ago? It is the same chair, the same window, the same walls, and yet something fundamental has shifted, not just in the lighting, but in the very texture of the air, the weight of the silence, and the way your mind moves through the space. If you are awake right now, listening to this in the quiet hours while the rest of the world seems to be asleep, I want to gently welcome you to this space, because while it can feel solitary, you are certainly not alone in this experience. Many people find themselves here, in this quiet pocket of existence where the rules of the day seem to lift and dissolve, leaving behind something raw and unfiltered. It is a curiosity that many of us carry, this question of why the night feels like a separate reality. A hidden kingdom that only opens its gates when the sun goes down and the noise of industry fades away. It is not just that it is dark or that we are tired, but rather there is a distinct shift in perception that happens when the distractions of the daylight retreat, and we are left with nothing but our thoughts and the steady, rhythmic passage of time. This is where the feeling begins to change, often starting with the visual world around us, because when the sun sets, our world physically shrinks. During the day, your vision can stretch to the horizon, taking in distant buildings, clouds, traffic, and people moving blocks away. But at night, the world contracts to the pool of light from a lamp, or the glow of a screen, or the faint illumination of a street lamp casting long, unfamiliar shadows across the floor. This shrinking of the world creates an immediate intimacy, a forced focus that can feel cozy to some, but to others it can feel like being placed on a stage where the audience is vast and invisible. It is in this reduced visual field that our other senses begin to heighten, trying to fill in the gaps that the darkness has created. You might notice the hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounds like a heavy mechanical breath, or the settling of the house's foundation sounds like footsteps, or the wind outside takes on a voice that it doesn't have at noon. This is not your mind playing tricks on you, but simply your awareness expanding into the space that the daytime noise usually occupies. In the daylight, the world is cluttered with sensory input, horns, conversations, notifications, the sheer brightness of the sun, all competing for your attention. But at night, that clutter is swept away, and in that vacuum, the smallest details become magnified. This brings us to a sensation that many people quietly notice at night, something that is difficult to describe but universally felt, which is the alteration of time itself. During the day, time is a measurement, a series of appointments, deadlines, and schedules, broken into hours and minutes that we track and manage. We use time as a tool, something we spend or save. But at night, time stops being a tool and starts being a sensation, a physical presence that fills the room. Without the markers of the workday, the lunch break, the commute, the meetings, time loses its structure and becomes fluid, sometimes stretching out so that a single hour feels like a lifetime, or compressing so that you look at the clock and realize 3 hours have vanished in what felt like a moment. It is here, in this fluid state, that some people stumble across a term that describes this heightened, sometimes heavy awareness of time's passage, a word known as chronophobia. While the term itself sounds clinical, in this context, we can think of it simply as a name for that specific, deeply human feeling that arises when the distraction of doing stops, and we are left only with the reality of being. It is not necessarily a fear, but rather an acute, undeniable recognition that the clock is ticking, that moments are slipping through our fingers, and that the silence of the night is the only thing honest enough to let us hear it happen. In the brightness of the noon sun, we are immortal because we are busy, but in the quiet of 3 a.m., we are simply present, and that presence can feel heavy. This is where the feeling shifts for many of us. moving from a simple observation of the room to a deeper observation of the self. Because the night doesn't just change the room, it changes the thinker. Have you ever noticed that your thoughts at night have a different quality than your thoughts during the day? Daytime thoughts are usually pragmatic, focused on tasks, logistics, and immediate problems: what to eat, what to email, where to drive. Nighttime thoughts, however, tend to detach from the practical and drift toward the existential, the nostalgic, and the abstract. It is as if the darkness acts as a developing fluid for memories that are too faint to see during the day. You might find yourself suddenly remembering a conversation from 5 years ago with vivid clarity, or replaying a mistake you made in childhood, or feeling a sudden, sharp pang of missing someone you haven't thought about in months. This mental time travel is a natural response to the lack of new stimulation. With nothing new coming in through your eyes and ears, your mind turns inward, sorting through the archives of the past. It is a beautiful, if sometimes melancholic, process. The night is the time of the poet and the philosopher in all of us, the time when we try to make sense of the narrative of our lives. But this introspection can also make the world feel strangely fragile. When we are the only one awake, or when it feels that way, there is a sense of guardianship. As if we are the watchmen of the world, keeping an eye on things while everyone else has drifted off to where we cannot follow. This solitude is double-edged. On one side, it is incredibly peaceful, a private sanctuary where no one expects anything from you, where you don't have to be productive or polite or presentable. You can just exist. But on the other side, that solitude can feel vast, and the silence can become loud enough to hear your own heart beating. Which brings us back to that awareness of the biological clock, the ticking rhythm of life itself. It is fascinating to consider how the atmosphere of the night impacts our sense of possibility. There is a concept often talked about in architecture and art called liminal space. A threshold, a waiting room, a hallway. A place that is not a destination but a transition between two states. The night is the ultimate liminal space. It is no longer today, but it is not quite tomorrow. It is a suspended state of reality where the rules of consequence feel different. This is why creativity often surges at night, why writers and artists find their flow when the sun goes down, because the pressure of the real world has lifted. But for those simply lying in bed or sitting in a quiet living room, this suspended state can feel groundless, as if the anchor has been pulled up and we are drifting in open water. The solidity of the ground feels less certain when you can't see the horizon. This brings us to a specific aspect of the night that changes how we feel: the quality of the light itself. Artificial light, the glow of a lamp, the blue hue of a television, the harsh orange of a street lamp filtering through blinds, creates a theatrical effect. It highlights certain things and completely erases others. In this high-contrast world, our brain has to work harder to interpret safety and reality. Evolutionarily, we are wired to be more alert at night, to listen for the snap of a twig or the movement of a shadow. And even though we are sitting safely in our modern homes, that ancient circuitry is still humming in the background. That low-level hum of alertness, combined with the lack of anything to actually be alert about, can transmute into a feeling of restlessness or a heightened sensitivity to the passage of time. It is a misalignment between our biology, which expects a predator, and our reality, which offers only a ticking clock and a quiet room. And here is where the experience of chronophobia, or that time-based sensitivity, often manifests most clearly. It is not just about the clock on the wall. It is about the feeling of life moving forward while we are standing still. During the day, we move with time, we rush alongside it. At night, we sit still, and time rushes past us. We can feel the friction of it. We might think about how much time has passed since we were children, or how quickly the last year went by, or we might project ourselves into the future, wondering where we will be in 10 years. These are heavy thoughts, thoughts that the daylight is too busy to carry, so they are left on the doorstep of the night. It is important to recognize that feeling this weight does not mean something is wrong. In fact, it is a deeply healthy, albeit uncomfortable sign of being human. It means you are paying attention. In a world that is constantly distracting us, constantly trying to sell us the next moment, stopping to actually feel the current moment, even if that moment feels heavy or slow, is a radical act of presence. Many people describe the night as a magnifying glass. If you are sad, the night can make it feel profound. If you are lonely, the night can make the room feel cavernous. But if you are peaceful, the night can feel like a warm blanket. The environment amplifies whatever internal state you are carrying, because there is nothing external to dilute it. This is why the night feels like a different world. It is a world that is less about the external environment and more about the internal landscape. We project our inner lives onto the darkness. If we return to that idea of the world shrinking, we can also see it as the world focusing. There is a strange beauty in the isolation of the night. Think about the view from a window at 2 a.m. You might see a single car passing by, its headlights sweeping across the trees, and for a moment you wonder who is driving it, where they are going, what story they are living. That brief connection, that wondering, is something that rarely happens in the chaos of rush hour. The night restores a sense of mystery to the world. It reminds us that we are small, that the world is large, and that there are millions of other stories unfolding in the dark alongside ours. And even if we are focused on the passage of time, on the ticking seconds, there is a solidarity in knowing that everyone else awake at this hour is likely feeling the exact same shift in gravity. We are all drifting in the same current. Sometimes the discomfort we feel comes from resistance. We want the night to be over, or we want to be asleep, and so we fight the experience of the now. But what happens if we stop fighting it? What happens if we accept that, for these few hours, the world is supposed to feel different? It is supposed to feel slower. It is supposed to feel quieter. The heavy feeling of time might just be the feeling of the earth settling. It is possible to reframe that sensitivity, that chronophobia-adjacent sensation, not as a source of anxiety, but as a rare opportunity to witness time rather than just consume it. The ticking of the clock doesn't have to be a countdown. It can just be a rhythm, a heartbeat of the room, proof that the mechanism of the world is still working while everyone sleeps. As we move deeper into the night, toward the early hours of the morning, the texture of the silence often changes again. The heavy, thick silence of 1 a.m. gives way to the fragile, anticipatory silence of 4 a.m. The world begins to hold its breath, waiting for the sun. This is the time when the feeling of the different world is at its peak. It is the furthest point from the familiarity of the previous day, and yet the closest point to the renewal of the next. It is a suspended moment where anything feels possible because nothing has happened yet. It is a blank page. For those who struggle with the weight of these hours, it can be helpful to remember that this state is temporary. The sun always rises. The noise always returns. The shadows always retreat. The world that feels so strange and heavy right now will, in a few hours, feel familiar and light again. The clocks will go back to being tools for scheduling rather than instruments of existential measurement. The memories that felt so sharp will soften in the morning light. The different world of the night is not a permanent residence. It is a tide that comes in and goes out. And perhaps the reason it feels so jarring is simply because we visit it so rarely with our eyes open. We are meant to sleep through this transformation, to close our eyes in one world and open them in the same one, missing the journey in between. But when we are awake, we see the transformation. We see the backstage of the universe. And while that can be unsettling, while it can make us confront the passage of time in a way that feels raw, it is also a privilege. You are seeing the world in its most honest state, quiet, still, and turning. So, if you are sitting there right now, feeling the weight of the hour, feeling the vastness of the silence, know that you are simply experiencing the night for what it is. You are not losing time, you are feeling it. You are not trapped in the dark. You are just awake in the quiet. The strangeness you feel is just the contrast between the noise of your life and the peace of the planet. And as the minutes tick by, leading you slowly back toward the dawn, try to let yourself just be here, in this different world, safe in the knowledge that the morning is already on its way, bringing the familiar world back to you. If this reflection resonated with you, and you felt this shift in the world late at night, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for being here.